Hello everyone, welcome to the second book for the architecture book review series kind of thing. So for this video, I'm gonna flip through the World Architecture and Illustrated History book. This book was published in the 60s. There's a lot of people in charge of this book. So if you just go to the contents, you're gonna see that each section there's someone in charge of it. So the good thing about this book is that there's a lot of, it covers a lot of the architecture throughout the world. So we have the Chinese, the Japanese, the Islamic, the medieval, the Renaissance, and the modern. And of course the ancient and the classical, which is like way back. The book starts with the ancient and the classical. So we have here the ziggurats, we have the Chat al-Hayuk, which is like the earliest recorded architecture we have. So this is like the prehistoric and Mesopotamian architecture. And the good thing is that there's a lot of illustrations and there's a lot of plans, very detailed illustrations. So we're just gonna flip through the book. It also mentions the Egyptian architecture in here, and there's a lot of beautiful illustrations and sections for the temple of Eros or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, so there's a lot of sections in here. We have here the section of one of the pyramids. Here there's a lot of beautiful photos also that was included in the book. So if we just move even further, we have the Greek and Hellenistic architecture, which is like in Athens. Even mentions the orders of the columns, which are the Doric, the Corinthian, and the Ionic. And let me see what else. These are like really nice sections and illustrations. I mean, it's rare, you rarely find these things in recent books for some reason. The people who did the scanning of this book did a really good job. So let me see, there's like more of the Roman architecture. Flip through more. And then the next section is going to be the Chinese architecture. So they do mention a lot about the architecture of the temples, the houses, also like how are these interlocking kind of wood is in illustration. There's a lot of temples in here, the Buddhist temple. So we have the Temple of Heaven also here. Too bad they didn't put the floor plan of this because it's really beautiful in real life. So what else? There's an introduction to Buddhism. So they also mention how Buddhist architecture is. And then houses. So how they were designing houses in Chinese architecture. And then they go into the Japanese architecture. So this is the pre-Buddhist period. And then it goes to a lot of the periods of the Japanese, what is this? Japanese period? I don't know, whatever. So what else? It goes then to the Indian architecture. I really like how it's like very simple and very thorough at the same time. So you have a lot of photos and a lot of illustrations that are very compacted, but also explains a lot about the style of architecture in these city and these periods. So we have the early forms of architecture in India. There's a lot of these temples. We have the Hindu temple here. What else? Okay, so mostly temples in Indian historic architecture. The next one is going to be the Islamic architecture. So there's a lot of mosques in here. We have the North African, Spain mosque architecture. We have the Mesopotamian and Persia, but like in the Islamic periods. And then it mentions the Islamic architecture in Turkey. And then goes to the Islamic architecture in India. The next one is going to be the medieval. So we have the Roman vaulted buildings. There's a lot of beautiful floor plans of these buildings. It mentions about the domes and then goes to the basilica. And then it explains the Byzantine architecture. Goes more. And then it even mentions Russia. There's a lot of Russian architecture here. And then, what else? Art in the West. And then it talks about the Romanesques in France. What else? And then Romanesque in Spain. And then next the Romanesque in Britain. And then Italy. And then it mentions the Romanesque in Germany. And then transitions to Gothic in France. So there's Gothic in France, where it all started, and then goes to the Germany and the Netherlands, and then goes to Italy and Britain. And then it mentions the Renaissance. So Italy basically in the 15th century, and then the 16th century, and now it mentions the Renaissance in the 16th century outside of Italy. So I think it's talking about Germany, Belgium and other cities. What else? This is all Italy again in the 17th century. And then, see, the Netherlands in the 17th century. And then the early 18th century. So this is like all before the modern architecture movement. So now go to the modern architecture. And then it explains how we're moving towards a new architecture. So we have the skyscrapers, and this one's in Chicago. What else? There's a lot of buildings featuring Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, these guys, Mies van der Rohe, the Guggenheim. And then I think it's the last page. No, it's not. It's like the one before. There's this building by Oscar Niemeyer, and then it ends it with the expansion of modern architecture, and that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys like the flip through. I didn't want to talk a lot about anything. I just wanted to show what's inside the book. I would leave the enjoyment of reading to whoever wants to get this book. It's a really good book. There's a lot of beautiful photos. Although it's old, but I think it's like one of the most thorough architecture books there are out there. Because I feel like they always focus on European architecture for some reason. And they just totally skip the other side of the world, which is like India. Now I know these guys didn't mention the South American architecture, like the Mayan and stuff like that, but I don't know, who am I to judge? So yeah, I think this book is very thorough. There's a lot of beautiful illustrations. Most important thing is that they have the plans and the sections, and they're really explaining a lot about how they used to approach architecture design back in historical times. So yeah, I would like to thank the people who actually scanned this book. It's a really good scan for the book, and I would highly recommend getting this book if you're interested in actually learning more about the history of architecture in general, because it's not like one of those books that says how to tell if this is Chinese architecture or how to tell if this is Japanese architecture. I mean, there's separate books for that, like they talk about only about architecture styles. So if you just want to know a general idea about historical architecture, or like the history of architecture around the world, I would totally recommend getting this book. Old is Gold. It's a really good book. I would highly recommend it, and I think this is it for today. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.